Hi, folks. My name is Shawn. I am the charity ambassador. This is America's Fundraisers, and I am here to interview today my friend George Franco. George Franco owns Faith Realty and Auctioneers, or he'll tell me if I mispronounced the actual name. He's also known as the Good News Auctioneer. And I think I know how he got that name, but I haven't seen George in probably 4 years. I think it was in Grand Rapids we were discussing a little bit earlier. But George has always been sort of a mentor to me and one of those fantastic guys. He hails out of the Lawrenceville, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, the Atlanta area. And while I love what he does and love him, Georgia, me being an Ohio State guy, I don't know about that, but well, we do fine. George, tell the world about yourself and how did you come to become the Good News Auctioneer?
Hi, Shawn. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am still a freelance television news reporter. My previous life was George Franco, Fox 5 News Atlanta, and Channel 13 Sacramento, and KFWB Los Angeles, Hollywood, and all over the country as a television news reporter. And I came to the South, and truth be told, my agent said, you can't do freelance for video production work because your owner of the company, Fox News, says you can't do that. So I said, well, what else am I going to do? And he said, well, find something else. He goes, you're not going to beat Rupert Murdoch. This is a Fox-owned and operated station, WAGA in Atlanta, Georgia. So I started, what am I going to do? I bought a house at an auction. I bought a car at an auction. I'd always loved auctioneers. I thought, what an exciting thing, 20 buy, 30 buy, able to buy. And I thought, if I could learn that chant, my world would change. So I became an auctioneer. I went to auction school, not thinking or even understanding or even knowing what charity auctions were. I'm doing a country auction in Winder, Georgia, 20 buy, 30 buy, able to buy now, 40 buy, 55, 65. Sir, that's 65 cents for socks, in the South and many parts of our country. Auctions are a big thing and it's a community thing. So I was selling socks for a little bit of money, just learning the ropes of how to be an auctioneer. Somebody came up to me and recognized me from the news and said, you're the dude on TV. Why aren't you doing this for charity? I went, what's that? Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. And the bell went off. And I discovered fundraising as a different method of raising funds and using the auction method. And as we now know, so many other methods of raising funds for the right causes. And so that's how I ventured into that world of charity fundraising. The Good News Auctioneer, your Good News Auctioneer, came from one day when I had started fundraising and I was on my way to work. And I knew the story, and it was one of those bad stories. And you saw the story before the night ahead, and it had something to do with somebody getting hurt or killed. And we're speaking to a victim, and you know what the news is. And I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds me, but after a while, it seeped into me, and I thought, I'm just tired of the bad news of the world. I need good news. And I went, oh, the Good News Auctioneer. So that's how your Good News Auctioneer was born. Literally woke up one day and bolted out of bed saying, your Good News Auctioneer. So that's how I got that moniker. And it means a lot to me because I truly understand the issues with practically, and I would say every nonprofit that I have ever helped, whether it comes to animal abuse, human abuse, sex trafficking, drug abuse, overdose, all of those issues I have seen up close and personal in 30 years of covering the news. So I've always had a strong sense and understanding of what the money was going to be used for because I've seen the end result. And I always thought, if I could get to the other side of these end results where the news is bad, and let me get to the good news. And so that's how I kind of flipped the switch and went into the Good News Auctioneer. And about 2.5 years ago now, going on 3 years, I took early retirement from the news and said, I want to do this full time. And so I've been concentrating on fundraising, but that's how your Good News Auctioneer was born. And you mentioned Faith Realty. I'm not the owner of Faith Realty. Kenny Everson, my broker, is the owner of Faith Realty. I'm a licensed realtor and a licensed auctioneer and have the licenses and the wherewithal to do all that in Georgia But truth be told, I have way more fun doing fundraising, and it's more impactful to me. So that's my main focus. And interesting as well, because I also have Tiger Eye Media. You remember, Shawn, that during COVID, people didn't know what to do. How do we raise money? We can't get together. There's a pandemic going on. We can't talk to each other. So we would show up, and I think you were part of this. A lot of auctioneers were, and they were connecting the dots with how do we raise money when we can't get together with our 8 or 6 or 500 people, and how do we do that? And it turned to virtual fundraising. One part was getting in front of a camera, and I'm like, oh, I could do that. The other part was raising funds through software, and I'm like, oh, I could do that. So actually, I found a really interesting place that I connected the dots for a lot of folks, where we were doing fundraising through virtual fundraising, and I found that to be an interesting part. So I found that folks who were fundraisers weren't necessarily in front of a camera very easily or very comfortably. One of my main auctioneers, he said, dude, I am not getting in front of a camera no matter what. He didn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He said, it's the energy of the crowd that makes an auction for me. And the other part is I found that folks who do AV didn't understand fundraising. So I came from a world where I understand both of those elements, and I still understand both those elements, and they're still coming together. So I don't know if that's an exact answer to what you're asking, but that's kind of where I'm at. That's who I am right now.
Well, it is a completely different world, giving your energy to that camera and
it is different.
Treating it not as just an individual looking eye to eye in that camera, but also treating it as a crowd and feeling.
Right.
You can't feel the energy of the crowd. I understand where your auctioneer is coming from, but I have always said that as an auctioneer, I give my energy to the crowd. If you want an auctioneer that's going to stand on stage and stand at the dais, and that's not me. I get down in and amongst my crowd and I bounce around like a pinball machine. But I can see where giving that energy to the camera might be difficult for some. Gratefully, we're coming out of that, and looks
Amen,
like there's
brother.
plenty of live auctions going on these days. And philanthropy is alive and well today. What are some of the issues that you see facing nonprofits these days that affect our industry, or facing auctioneers? The floor is yours. You can go wherever you want with that.
Well, I think something we probably have all seen is what happens in life. I'm a little older now, Social Security age officially. So when we get to a certain phase of our life, we have more assets, and generally we've worked harder and longer and have been able to store more nuts away like a squirrel should for the wintertime and for those longer days and longer nights. And so I think that translates directly into fundraising, because tell me if you think otherwise, but generally speaking, the folks who show up with the funds tend to be past 40. The younger crowd, they show up not in larger numbers. They show up not in and with as much of an attention span. I think it's a tighter attention span, and they technologically are differently connected, if you will. And so I've seen that, where bridging the gap between an older generation, which is more affluent, and the younger generation, which is more connected, and how do you bring those two together into the future? And I think that's one of the issues every nonprofit is facing, because as the baby boomers age out and the next generation comes up and the generation after that, how do we keep that trend going of philanthropy when old school fundraising, is kind of out the door with the numbers and everything? Some folks, they're absolutely intent on doing everything on the phone. And I'm not a big fan, but I've tried to adapt when it comes to text by giving and raising funds in a different way, in a more virtual way, in a live environment. I'm still a big fan of using the bid cards and getting the actual connection to the people. But realistically, I think the younger folks, they've got a different mindset. They're not necessarily for a 4-hour, 3-hour gala. So how do we cut that down? How do we raise the funds? How do we connect with them? And how do you connect those bridges between the older generation and the newer generation? Because if there's anything we do know is that nonprofits need a sustainable path forward, and that fundraising is part of that. And if I can be part of a team that helps a nonprofit grow in a meaningful way toward the future, I think that's a conversation we have had. We actually have had that with various boards about, okay, you've got some folks who are younger, and how do we bring them in? And I think that's a challenge. So in that sense, I think technology is a friend and a foe. I'm still a big fan of in person, but we got to change with the times.
You've absolutely hit on a very, very difficult issue. I remember an event that I was doing where I'm trying to do a fund a need, and they don't have bitter paddles. They have phones, and it's like, who's going to be my champion? Who's going to give at this level? Everybody's nose is buried in their phones, and they're acting like they're giving. They're not. I don't know what they're doing, but it is. I don't know. I'm older too. I'm mid-50s, and I know I'm not drawn. I wasn't born with a computer in my hand. I wasn't born with a cell phone in my hand. Now, I've had my Verizon account for 28, 30 years, but these kids that were born into it, that is a tough issue on how to attract new donors and to develop them. Do you think perhaps through volunteerism, if that's even a word, is that a way to draw new people in that may not have the funds but might have the time? And is it time for us to look at what do they call the new job out there? The people that stand in front of the camera on social media and don't do anything, but they have a lot of followers. The influencers.
Yeah.
Is it because the influencers, they can raise you a lot of money? I was talking with Ruth Grayson the other day, and she's talking about live streaming and some of these things that I've never heard of, right, and how they're actually doing benefits. And these influencers have 100,000 followers, and they put the word out and they raise money. Certainly not to the extent that we do in $1 million event or a $100,000 event, but is that coming? She seems to think so. And that is a very interesting conversation to have with the boards and with the nonprofits. So I thank you for bringing that to my attention. Now,
no, I was going to say absolutely. I think it goes back to what I was saying about virtuals and now hybrids, where you've got some folks in-house and some folks somewhere else, and they are connecting the dots through this smartphone, and you can connect that with several cameras around a room. And what I found myself doing is being more of a producer for a show, like I did when I was in television. I've done several shows like fundraisers, old Jerry Lewis telethon style, where you connect that and then you bring that to an audience. And we did a few of these where instead of a gala, we're having a show, and you've got cameras, and you tell everybody, ladies and gentlemen, in 10 minutes, we're about to go live. In 5 minutes, stand by. 1 minute, 30 seconds, 4, 3, 2, cue them. And everybody has a different sense because they realize they're on camera. So if on the other side of that, we've got influencers and folks that are connected to the cause and they're spreading the word, sure, why not? I see that as a real possibility. I saw what Ruth was talking about. I saw a little bit of her. She was on one of those shows, nonprofit show, I think it was, and I did watch it, and I thought I was fascinated because I thought, well, that's kind of where I was coming from. But you're right. I'm a little older than you, not much, But we come from a different generation. I think this next generation, these influencers, these Kardashians, these people who live and die and make millions of dollars because of their virtual and viral videos into that. And I think another point that's interesting, Shawn, is that corporate America is also now, with this younger generation, taking on a more, I don't want to, I'll stay away from that woke word, but let's just say a sensitive approach to our communities, that they understand there are downtrodden, that they understand there's underrepresented, that they understand inclusiveness. And so if you've got a younger generation that sees the world in a different way, that includes maybe more inclusiveness and more diversity, then how do you spread that connection to fundraising through technology like we talk about when we do a hybrid event? I mean, those are all real possibilities, and I think that's all there. I think everybody who's looking at that is saying, where does it go? And the technology is evolving, the fundraising is evolving, and I hope we're part of it, because I don't see it as anything is set in stone. I see it all very fluid, and whatever we do to influence it can make a big part of it, if that makes sense.
I also think of hybrid. Two things come to mind. When I was doing personal property auctions, I had to laugh with a grain of salt, but it was because of what I did. I had to laugh at the guys that had live auctions, and they'd have 150 bidders that would come to their auction and stand there in the rain for 3, 4, 5 hours, what used to be 8, 10 hours. But at the end of those auctions, they'd be giving away tables of stuff, the less desirable stuff, and I do call it stuff, for very little money. When I was an online auctioneer, I used to reach out, and I think one of my friends has auctions where he has 50 states, 38 countries, and that. The most I think I ever had was 35 states that I had bidders in, and we shipped items all over. That's something to keep in mind when you're talking about benefit auctions, because not everybody is in the area when you have your live event, your auction gala. I'm also reminded of the church. Every church I've ever gone to, and I was born and raised in a Catholic church. I was married in a Baptist church, and the last church I attended was a Methodist church in a Presbyterian building. But every Sunday they came in and they had prayers for the elders, mostly, that could not attend, or that were not able to attend. And I'm reminded that a lot of those people could be, and probably are, very, very good donors, and might be in a position where they're thinking about giving to philanthropic ideals that are strong in them. What are your thoughts as far as the hybrid? Now, don't get me wrong. I love a good, strong live event. It's what I'm best at. I've been on stage since second grade, and that's just me. But I also want to do what is absolutely the best for my clients, which are the nonprofits.
I am completely in agreement with you. On stage, in person, in your face, next to each other, touching and connecting with people, I think is by far the best approach to raising funds. However, there's always a however. If you've got a international nonprofit, like one of my folks that we had worked with, and they had connections in Nepal, Switzerland, Scotland, Ireland, Italy, California, Florida. We had people watching from all over the world. And so that allowed us to connect with those patrons who love the cause so much that they would tune in. And that's one of those kind of shows that we did hybrid with 150 people in hand, and then I don't know, 2-3 dozen across the world watching. And the bids did come in from those folks. So I think if it is that kind of a scenario where you've got an international nonprofit that has tentacles globally, then I think it works well. A hybrid will do well. I don't think it's such a thing that's going to really do very well if it's a local audience only. We did one in Chicago, and the big donors couldn't make it there, so they made a big effort to put up cameras and do a hybrid with only a few people at home, because that's where the deepest pockets were. But they had already donated ahead of time. And frankly, I thought it pulled away the audience that was there, because the way they set it up, and I wasn't involved in that, the way they set it up like a gala and had the people drop in on you. But the way they set the cameras up, it separated people, because they had me and the camera and then the folks on the side. And so if you're going to do that kind of an approach, I think, one, who's your audience? Two, are they going to connect with you virtually? Three, do we have a sense that they're going to give to the cause? And if not, then I don't think it works very well. Yeah, it's coming, but I think you're right. I think in person is the best way, the only way. But then again, you're an auctioneer. My friend, I'll give him a quick shout out. John McMurray, Angry Mamas. He's a friend. He's one of my backup auctioneers. Angry Mamas, because his wife, Natalie, would always get pissed off because he'd fill up the garage with stuff and he'd always auction it off. She's like, get it out of here. So they called it Angry Mama's Auction. Boy, I've seen John as an auctioneer for 10 years, and he's a great auctioneer. But it's shifted, and you tell me, as an auctioneer that sells stuff, if you will, and he specializes in man caves. He says that he, for the most part, is going away from traditional live auctions because he's got an audience nationwide, even worldwide, because of his man cave merchandise, that he says, one, he doesn't have to pay a big crew. Two, he doesn't have to open the doors. Three, he doesn't have to set up catering. Four, he ships it out. And five, he makes more money and it costs less money to run it. So that's just a different way. And I know a lot of auctioneers have backed away from live auctions because the online auctions do better in a lot of ways. So I think it depends. I don't think there's one answer. When it comes to fundraising, I think it works if you've got the audience that's going to connect to you virtually. And it would be nice if you have some of those influencers that can kind of spread the word for you. So yeah, I don't think there's any easy answers, but that's why we're having these conversations.
I think rare indeed is the auctioneer that can look dead into that camera and evoke the emotions, or the video, or the experience of the cause that we're raising money for. And that's hard to do on camera, and we're not Hallmark. So I think in our world, the online's got a way to go, and I think you and I are safe for the remainders of our careers. There's no question there. And speaking of the live auction, as live auctioneers that charge to do benefit galas, and well deservedly so, a lot of times we bring to the table revenue enhancers. For those that don't know what a revenue enhancer is, it's basically more money for your organization. I'll never forget a buddy of mine. Actually, we may have talked about this. I did a Zoom interview with him as well, but he said, I'll never forget when I talked to an organization after the event. They were so thrilled. They said that because of you, we will be able to grant 41 more wishes. And this organization, it's probably no secret about who it is, but their wishes aren't cheap. And that's why we do what we do. But the revenue enhancers, what is one of your favorites that you do in a live crowd to raise more money for the organization?
Well, kudos to Chad Carvey, because he introduced it to a lot of folks. The Last Hero, still a favorite, still makes a lot of money, still a lot of fun. And for those who don't know, the last hero is the last person to donate at a certain level wins a prize. And generally, I think those prizes should be about $1,000 or more. You'll get a sponsor to maybe donate a trip, or somebody had for kids to school, and there's a lot of moms and dads, and they had a PlayStation with a chair and a PlayStation games, and the PlayStation itself worth about $1,900. And so for $100, hands were all over the house. We went to 200, it's raised $9,000 in no time. Another one that I will give credit to, where credit is due, is Mike Namath, the Namath brothers, Mike and Johnny in Chicago. Mega benefit auctions events, friends and Good Auctioneers. They have what's known as a paddle drop. Maybe some other folks do it, but basically at the end, in lieu of, let's say you've done the last hero 2 or 3 times in a row, what do you do different? You basically ask everybody to put their card and toss it into a big basket, and it's basically a raffle. At the end, somebody pulls the number out of a big basket up at the front, and they win a prize. And generally speaking, I did that, and we got, I don't know, 80% participation. So you've got 600 people, you get 400 cards in the basket. That's $4,000, and it happens fast. I think that's an easy way. Another one has to do with I did this. It was okay. But I mean, you asked me about fundraisers, and Rochambeau, hands, paper, scissors. I'm so old, I don't know how to play that game still.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Fun.
1, 2, 3.
It was fun, and the audience.
I hate that game. I'm terrible at that game.
I never do well with it. But what I did to take it to another level is, a buddy of mine who's really good at it is an official umpire in the city of Atlanta, because they've got rock, paper, scissors tournaments. And I'm like, dude, get over here and be my umpire. So he was the umpire, and that was fun. Yeah, but I'm always looking for revenue raisers. I think those are the ones that come to mind. I wish I had one that I thought, this is absolutely perfect. As a bilingual auctioneer, I've done an event that was in English and Spanish, but I don't know if that was a revenue raiser per se, but I was bilingually speaking to a Spanish-speaking, English-speaking crowd, and 25.25 able to buy, now 25.35 able to buy at 35. So I like to do that, to go back and forth. And I think that the revenue raisers are important, but I still believe that it comes down to who's in your crowd. And I know that that is a challenge for everybody. If I come across a nonprofit, and one of the first things I always ask them is, well, who's going to be in the house? And it comes across, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, where did you get $300,000? That sounds like a good number. Okay. Okay. Well, like, for example, if there is a nonprofit, which I did 3 times in a row, and I thought, okay, that's enough. And I was at the beginning, I would always say, okay, well, I'll put my heart and soul into this, and I'll do a minimum with a maximum. I'm no longer a fan of that, just because I was starting, and I thought, okay, well, I want to help these nonprofits out, but they need to get their teams together so that they bring the people together. Because if you have like a nonprofit that has victims of domestic violence, and it's a Thrivers and Survivors Night, which is wonderful, but nobody else is there other than the victims of domestic violence, they didn't have any money. And they did it 3 times in a row. And I said, you got to change it up. You need the attorneys, the judges, the advocates, the folks who are going to show up with the money. And they tried, but it just wasn't happening. So, and even the lady said, we're trying, George, but she agreed with me. She said, so she moved on from that. So I think that's an important thing, is who's in the crowd, much more so than revenue raisers. I don't know. You tell me, because I'm always looking for revenue raisers, and that's a challenge, to be honest.
You are a legend. I asked you for 1 and you gave me 14. It's funny because my favorite is the last hero standing, also known as the last champion, the last angel, right. The runaround. I don't like to run around because it just, even though I do bounce around the room, I just don't care for that name. Somebody out on the West Coast called it the popcorn game because she popped around. That is one of my favorites. You said the paddle drop. Now I handle the paddle drop a little bit differently in that I do both. I do the last hero is one of your last opportunities to help. We're at the $100 level, or you're at the $200 level, or whatever level you decide to do it at. You do your last hero standing, and they win. And mine are typically 500 to, like you said, $1,000. They're always donated. One of the ones that's memorable is a school, and they have a mall per se that has things that attract both men and women. So it's not, they're not buying it for their wife. They're buying it for themselves. And many good things with the last champion, the last angel. And then that's one of the last ways I have to help you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the close. Look at the money that you guys have raised tonight. I want you to think of something. There's 200 people in this room. There's 200 registered bidders. There's 200 numbers. If you all gave $100, that'd be, whatever number that is, $2,000. 200 times 100, that's 20,000, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm an auctioneer. Who says I'm good at math? But then we send the basket around, and they can do the paddle drop, and I'm like, I can't get any more money out of you because they're taking your paddles. Go drop them in there. That's your last bit to give. And God bless you. I thank you. I'll see you next year. And then I do my exit. They raise that extra bit of money, and it might be 50, 60, 70%. I feel like I've drained them, and sometimes I have to be careful. You go with a feel of how the room is. I don't always do it, but that is one of the other ways. You talk about donor development. Donor development is so important. One of the most important things that I share with my boards is that stop getting your banker to sponsor the table and sending his tellers or her tellers as a prize that they get to go spend a nice dinner because we spent $2,000 on a table. Stop doing that.
Amen.
Need to get the people in there that can write a check for $10,000 or $2,000 or $100 even. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, that mentioned if you use table captains, you have a sponsor to the table, you can send a max of 2 people to that, and your table captains call people, and they're responsible for filling 1 table. Those are your volunteers. But here's taking it a step further. Instead of inviting anybody, give them a list. And on that list are people over the past years that have given to your organization. They've already written a check, so they are real donors. Now, I love the people that spend $150 or $75 to pay for their ticket, and they'll bid on your silent auction. But let's face it, you want as many as the deep pockets in the room that you can find, because we're doing it live. We're not doing it hybrid. So that seat is valuable real estate. Use it, treat it as such, think of it, and that's mine now. This is supposed to be your interview. I'm not supposed to be doing all this.
No, that's okay. I absolutely agree. I think it's an interesting balance of finding the right donors and the right sponsors, because the last thing you want is for a big corporate sponsor of a table to send 10 folks in, and we've seen that 5 or 6 are there, and the boss says, go to the party for me and go to the fundraiser. It's more of a party, and represent our company well, they show up and they have a good time, but they don't give any money because they're not personally connected to the cause. And if you can bring them in, great. But we've both seen it where, for the most part, a lot of times it's not that they're connected to the cause. It's because they showed up to appease the boss. So you're right. Donor development is absolutely critical. So I asked my my fundraising partners to go back and do the analytics over the years. Who's been there, who's consistent, who's loyal to your cause, and also do a deep dive into the ROI, the rate of investment, rate of return on your silent auction, live auction items. I'm sure you've run into this. You got 350 people and there's 200 silent auction items. Like, oh my God. And I always say,
I just did a video on that earlier this afternoon.
Oh, Jesus. We've all been there. And I always tell my folks, if you set up a bargain hunt, people will bargain hunt. And so if they go bargain hunting at the silent auction, that mentality is going to carry over to the live auction and the funded need, and it hurts you. And there is some debate on this. I'm still a fan of closing the silent auction before the live auction and fundraising so that those decisions are made and they're out of the way. Other people say it doesn't matter. Maybe, but I still like to have them closed before fundraising goes on. And you can still change it up, close it, and then open it. If you want to open it up afterwards, open it up afterwards. All these softwares, they allow you to do all kinds of analytics with them in there, and they've become so powerful over the years that there's a lot that you can do to store the information and come back to it and analyze it. So I think a deep dive into the analytics of who's there, what's your data say, and will they be in a place to donate again? Are they consistently donors, or is it a one-time, or is it sponsors who are providing all of the funds? And I also ask the folks to set up, and I'm sure you do this as well, is the challenge grants. It's better to go into a fundraiser with something in the bank than nothing in the bank. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if somebody's committed to you ahead of time, that you acknowledge them. And they did this to me once. I'm like, well, what are you doing? Somebody had brought them a check for $25,000. And we had talked about this, and unbeknownst to me, before the fundraising even started, they had the person come up and present the check for $25,000. And I thought, well, you know what? You could have saved that money to help us spur other donations. And then afterwards, if they want to present the check, they can still present the check. But I always think it's important to highlight and showcase, even if somebody wants to remain anonymous, you can still showcase their money for others to see, because, giving is contagious, not as bad as COVID, but in a good way. Giving is contagious, and it really is. And I think it can be contagious in the other way too, so that if people stop giving, others will stop giving. There's a real herd mentality to fundraising that I try and set the dominoes up ahead of time so that everything goes one way versus the other way. Because let's face it, it's not one thing, it's a lot of things. There's this energy curve, and if you get to the fundraising, when the energy's out, the money's going to go down. There's the way you set people up, and if they're all standing, the money's going to go down. If you sit them down and you have long, boring speeches, the money's going to go down. There's a lot of reasons the money goes down. Inspiration beats explanation every time. How many times have you done these? Oh my God, where they're just going on for 20 minutes about statistics and it's dry as sawdust, and the person who's doing it is just not very inspirational. And they may be the greatest person in the world, but they're not good in front of a crowd, and they're nervous, and it doesn't come off well. And so better to have a well-crafted video, or somebody who knows how to get in front of a crowd and keep it tight, and tap into to the energy level, to the love in the crowd, because there's a lot of things that can get in the way.
You hurt my heart when you said they brought them up on stage to give their $25,000 donation. I mean, their hearts were in the right place. They wanted to be so excited about that donation, and they forgot, or they didn't give you the opportunity to teach them a little known secret called leverage.
Absolutely.
How you could have leveraged that 25,000 into 50,000, or more, through motivation. But that's why they hire us.
And let me ask you this, because I always find, and this is the difference between me, George Franco, your Good News Auctioneer, now 7 or 8, maybe 8 years, 9 years. I've been doing this it's more than a couple of days now. versus when I first started. It's like when I was a reporter in Yakima, Washington, getting in front of the camera. I was like, what am I doing? Versus being a reporter in Atlanta, Georgia, in a major market, in where I get in front of a camera and I'm fine. Just toss me up there. I'll be fine. We'll figure it out. There comes a point where you become a different fundraiser, so that your energy and your I suppose your connectivity to the universe kind of flows through you in a different way. And I find that I'm in a different space now. Before I was much more nervous about asking for funds and how dare you. And now it's like, it's not about me, it's about the cause. And I have a much easier way of connecting myself to that connectivity now, so that it flows through me and it becomes more authentic and more real, if you will, when you're asking for funds. And for me, that's been a big thing over the last few years. But what I find is that if you don't talk to the folks ahead of time about who's really the leader, is it run by a do it my way or hit the highway executive director? Seen those. Is it run by a board chair who has all the money and is calling all the shots? Seen that. Is it run by the car dealership owner in town whose favorite cause is that night and he's going to be there with all the money? Seeing all of those specific examples. So when an event is happening and I'm trying to figure out what's the dynamics, those are some of the questions I'm asking of the people I'm working with. And another time, I'm sure you've seen this, Shawn, are you working with a decision maker, or is that decision maker passing along the information and bringing it back to you? So, I try to get to the core of who's involved with the fundraising, so that when the night comes up, I can go around and connect. And something else I will say, I like to do this now a lot, is before the fundraising takes place, I make it a point, I got to step out of my shell, because I think we all have that a little bit, and I do, and I have to find just get out there and be your good news auctioneer, be that guy, step into the role, be him, and talk to the audience. And I will hit all the tables, as many tables as I can, and just connect with the people, say hello, I'm your good news auctioneer, I'm here to help. And I say, something to the effect of, oh, I'm sure everybody has whatever your financial commitment is, and I hope that's a good one tonight, but I know that everybody can be my cheerleader. So what I do is I go around to the tables and ask for cheerleaders. And then when I'm up on stage, I found this, and it's kind of fun. I said, where's my cheerleaders? Yeah, the crowd goes crazy. So I'm just finding different ways to connect to the audience, so that when I get up there, they know me. Because if it's a first time for me doing a fundraiser, and let's say it's in South Carolina or North Carolina, where I'm like, okay, somebody found me there and they bring me up and they don't know me. Why do they want to give me money for the cause? I need to be part of the filter that says it's going to the right cause, versus looking at a stranger saying, here's the money. Does that make sense? I think it really matters, so that you connect the dots emotionally, so that fiscally they're connecting with you, and then they donate to the cause.
It's absolutely everything that you said. When I'm talking to the organization, I am Shawn, the auctioneer. It's business, and you have to deal with the control freak executive chair. You've got to deal with the board that thinks they know everything. And I've gotten so many jobs because I will guide you. I will give you any information that I can. However, it's your event. We'll do it your way and with no issues. And if it raises less money, that's on you. I gave you the opportunity, and there's that harshness that's there as a businessman, as a lifelong entrepreneur, that I've been on my own for 40 years. That said, when the event comes, I am one of the first people there. I'm there with the caterers setting up, and I become the charity ambassador. Then all of a sudden, it's no longer me. I'm here strictly for the cause, and like you, I am mingling with the crowd. My mother always said that I was a chameleon. that I got along with the people in the trailer park as well as I did with the doctors and the lawyers and the professionals, the educators, things of that nature. And it was very true. So I always laugh and joke with the donors that are coming in. I ask who the big donors are. I ask who the little donors are and ask who they don't know. And I try to get out there and among the crowd and see what they're interested in, why they're there. And as part of it's just because I am a friendly person and I try to maintain that effervescence. There's your $3 word for the day. I try to maintain that for the entire time that I'm there, but I always remember that none of this is about me. It's all about the cause and what I can do, not to extract money from your pocket, but to make you, to inspire you to want to overflow your blessings into this particular cause that you have paid money to be part of. I want to open up a channel. You know, I think of it like a water hose. You can have a small water hose where the water just kind of trickles through, or you can have a 3-inch PVC pipe that the water can pour through. That's what I want to cause. I want to see a gushing, an outpouring of love. A lot of times, especially in this world today, we don't give enough credit for love. And with these events, we are there to show our love. Yes, it's a business. Nonprofits are a business. But what are they in a business to do? They're in a business of passion, of love, of giving, of generosity. And that's what gives me the passion to do what I want to do with the rest of my career.
Amen, brother. You make me happy that I chose this route, because it's absolutely about giving back. Because ultimately, you know, when it's all said and done, well, what are we going to have to look back on? And I have a mantra, and it's an easy one. And it works, I think, for every fundraiser. Maya Angelou says that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will always remember how you made them feel. So if we can make them feel that feeling of love and generosity, that they're making a difference, that they're giving back to their favorite cause, that they're part of your angel ambassadors, if you will, that it means something, then I think if they walk away with this feeling of good in their heart and soul, then they come back, and that's when the money goes up anyway. So that ultimately is the goal, is to let the love and the universe work through you so that we raise more funds to continue the good work that these great nonprofits are doing. So amen, man. I love it.
I have a question. What advice, there's 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States. Now, not all of them have benefit auction galas. Some of them would like to. Some of them have no idea that they exist. There's about, I don't know what, 300-400 benefit auctioneers in the United States. What advice would you give to an auctioneer or a new auctioneer or an auctioneer that wants to transition? What advice would you give them to find nonprofits? And in turn, what advice would you give nonprofits that are looking for an auctioneer, but everybody they call is booked, or they're trying to raise $8,000-$10,000, and every auctioneer is $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000? What kind of advice would you give in those scenarios?
Well, let's start with the nonprofits first. I bet you've been there. I know I've been there, when they call you and say, you know, we had one of the fathers and he's a great guy and he sure is a lot of fun and he's funny, but he started embarrassing people and he started calling people out. And he's like, yeah, John, I know you got the money, cough it up. We've all seen that, where people who aren't trained in fundraising become the fundraisers, and it hurts the cause.
Well, you mean that's wrong?
Exactly. I mean, free is not free. No matter what you think about it, you're going to lose money when you're doing a free auctioneer that isn't a professional at it. And let's face it, I mean, we uh, learn the best practices through other fundraising professionals across the country, and we share in those tactics. So that's why us benefit auctioneer specialists understand what to do. So I would say to the nonprofits, bring in the professional. If you respect your nonprofit, if you love your cause, love it enough to invest in a quality professional benefit auctioneer who can make the difference, and listen to them, pay attention to them, work with them. If you're going to say, well, that's how we've always done it, then, don't blame them at the end when it didn't go well, when you didn't change a thing and you thought, well, he's going to save the day because he's a professional, but we're going to do it the same way we did it before. And we've all been there. And I'm like, well, what did you expect? You didn't change a thing. So you brought in everybody, and everybody was standing up, and you did a buffet that took 2 hours to get through because you only set up one line and there's 400 people. It took forever to get through that buffet. And you put up all high tops, and everybody's back is to the fundraising. So if there's advice to be had from a professional, maybe pay a little bit of closer attention to it. To the auctioneer who's trying to get into this, oh, well, I don't know that it's my place, but I mean, if you ask me, I would say that learn to connect with people. I think as the television guy, I've connected with people for years, but it was interesting for me. I had to kind of shift my gears. As a TV news dude, I was like kind of the tough ass. I was chasing the bad politicians and chasing the bad guys, and you see the news. It was never, and I mean, I got a couple of awards for some feature stories, and I love those stories. But generally speaking, the news was kind of rough, and so I had a different mentality, and I was aggressive, and now I am a much gentler soul that is in a different place, that has a different way of approaching people. So that for me personally has been kind of a revelation, and I love it because it puts you in a different place. So as an auctioneer, if you're a cattle auctioneer, and oh my God, we know the champion is in Georgia 2 years ago, is it Mr. Yoder, Tim Yoder, who was our former president of the Georgia Auctioneers Association, was a champion cattle auctioneer. Great auctioneer, great auctioneer. I don't pretend to be that caliber of auctioneer that sells cattle or cars or whatever, because I think we're not really auctioneers that are selling anything. We're asking people to be part of a greater cause than ourselves. We're inviting people to participate in fundraising. So I'm always with a fundraising hat on. I try not to think of myself as an auctioneer when I'm up there, because if you try and sell a watch, everybody's going to try and get a deal on a watch. So that'll always go down in value. If you try and sell jewelry, that'll always go down in value. Same thing with art. It's all in the eye of the beholder. So generally, you know how that does, unless it's a Penley or somebody who's a famous painter or somebody who's doing speed art. And even then it's iffy. So you're trying to put on a boutique, and at that boutique is auction items that are more memorable than merchandise. It's more inspirational than transactional, so that when those fundraising processes go on, when the fundraising happens, people are giving from their heart, not to get a bargain. And you'll always get more money for that. It's that same old thing. Vince Dooley, he's gone now, the winningest UGA coach. But oh my God, I was so honored that I sold a fly fishing trip with Vince Dooley, two of them, $6,000 twice. I've sold fly fishing trips. They sell for $1,000 if you're lucky. But it's all about Vince Dooley. And now I think about the people who went on that trip, and they're like, I got to go with the coach, and now he's gone. It's all about the memories. You can always get more money, but you can't get more memories. That's one of my favorite sayings.
You're absolutely right. And that's it's a beautiful thing when you can do something like that. I want to thank you for coming on and doing this interview. I really don't have any more questions for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? You did mention something about the transactional buyer versus the philanthropic uh, giver. I don't even want to call them a buyer, even though they do buy because they know what they're doing. And like the bid calling, I am not a championship cattle auctioneer, livestock. I'm not a championship automobile auctioneer. I'm not a champion. You know, I got into a bid calling contest in the state of Ohio when I was brand new, and it was the most embarrassing thing ever because I was older, and out of 25 auctioneers, I couldn't even make it into the top 10. And it was like, oh my goodness. But I discovered my rhythm and everything. I became an auctioneer because to me that auction call was a siren call. It was like the mermaid or the lighthouse. So I tried to give that experience to the donors because I'm all about the donor experience. When they want an auctioneer, they want an auctioneer. I will never be a Christie's or a Sotheby's art auctioneer that says, I have $500 and I have 700. I don't even know how to do that. I'm too excitable to do that. But I'm very, very, very clear on my numbers, and I don't use a whole lot of filler. But like I said, it doesn't matter because it's not so much about the transaction, it's more about the philanthropic. I do have a question for you. What do you think about I don't know that it's actually new, but I know a lot of boards have never heard of it, doing the fund a need, the fan, the special appeal, the cash call, doing that first while everybody's still in the room. What do you think about that? What's going on down in Atlanta?
Interesting that you asked that because in the last 2 or 3 years, I flipped it. Generally speaking, we would have an auction and then the fund a need. But then I thought, you know what? Let's think about this. If you think about how many people are involved in the live auction, you've got, if you're lucky, 20 to 25%, generally 15%. So out of 200 people, you've got 30. And that's generally not that, you don't have that many people doing the live auction. But the fund a need, you hopefully have 75, 80, 90% of the crowd. So why not get the big money first? And that I've switched that. And I think it's worked out. I like to do the fund a need first more these days, especially when it's an unknown. If it's an unknown and the nonprofit is like, well, we're not sure what's going to happen. And especially if they push the fundraising to a later hour, then I think it's more crucial to get to the fund a need first. So
I'm absolutely with you because it's like from auction school all the way to the end, they always say that the auction, you said it earlier, has an energy curve. It goes up and then it just goes down. It's just a matter of how fast it crashes, but it's going to go down. So it's like, get them while they're excited.
Absolutely.
You know, if you've got those 30 people that are giving in the live auction, what are those other 170 people doing? Or 270 or 370 people? What are they doing? They're on their phones. They're thinking about when's the babysitter going to be done? Should we take them a meal? What about the dog? You know, did I get an emergency phone call? Is something going on back at the office? This was fun, and their energy goes down. And so you have the live auction. You're all excited about it because, heck, you're on top of the world. And you just set records with those 30 people. But the people that you're trying to get to, and then you have to try to rebuild that energy with a speaker or a video, that inspiration. And it works. I mean, we've done it for years. But why not, when they come into the room and they're here and they're going to go up to here, it's a lot easier to get them from here to here than it is to get them from here and then get them back up and try to get them up higher. And it makes perfect sense. So
yeah. And you know, Shawn, you could see the energy curve You could see it crashing. I mean, I can call it to the minute more and more these days. I'm like, they're fading, they're starting to leave us, and we got to get to it. And I'll go to the fundraisers, to the board chairs, or to the development director, whoever my go-to person is. I say, we got to get on it. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. You can only do what you can do. But that's why I say put the big money first, because then I think you tap into the larger resources, and that's what it's all about anyway.
Do you
That's my opinion.
do you see them getting noisier, boss? Do you see them clamoring for the bar to reopen? They're not thinking about spending money right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's very important. So the last question I have for you, George, is if somebody wants to hire George Franco, the Good News Auctioneer, to run their fundraising event, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, you're very kind. I am licensed now in Georgia, Virginia, Ohio, South Carolina, North Carolina. Done a few gigs under the tutelage of the Nameoff brothers in Chicago. So I'm all legit. New Mexico. I'm bilingual. I want to go to Mexico. I want to go to Spain. I want to go to Latin America and conduct those auctions. So I am hoping to spread my wings. I have been spreading my wings. Uh, my website is George Frank. My website is Your Good News Auctioneer, www.yourgoodnewsauctioneer.com, or just Google in George Franco, Your Good News Auctioneer, Lawrenceville, Georgia, 404-433-7079. George Franco at yourgoodnewsauctioneer.com is my email. So I'm pretty easy to find. If you Google me in, I'll still show up as the TV dude once in a while.
Absolutely. And I thank you for your time and for giving to the nonprofits that we have no idea who's going to see this. But I appreciate you, appreciate your time, appreciate your friendship, appreciate your mentorship. My name is Shawn. I am the charity ambassador. That is pretty simple, the charityambassador.com. And then I'll have my stuff at the beginning and the end of the videos. But I appreciate this, George.